into the next chapter here, we're going to look at the world of universals. And what Russell is sort of doing is taking us through a thought journey, if you will. And he's looking at what we are directly acquainted with, and he mentions our sense data, which we sense perceptions, which we discussed that. But he also says we have direct acquaintance with universals, with these ideas, these concepts that exist independent of us. They're real of the world, but they're not located in the world. And this is one of the problems that philosophers have run into. And he ends the last chapter of a priori knowledge, regarding a priori knowledge, he says that it's the fact seems to be, this page 89, that all our a priori knowledge is concerned with entities which do not, properly speaking, exist either in the mental or in the physical world. And these entities, he says that he gives an example of qualities and relations that exist independent of us, independent of our minds. They exist in the objective real world. And one of the examples he gives is, he said, I exist and my room exists, but if he is in his room, in has meaning. It's a meaningful concept. And it says, does it exist? And so, the relation, he says that in some sense, in has existence, whether he's aware of it or not. There might be a bug in his room. Well, he's not aware of the bug's not aware of the room, but in applies to the bug in his room. And so he says, just by thinking, you come to this understanding that there are the particulars, but then there are these universals that apply, of everything in the material world. And they exist whether we think of them or not. They exist independent of us, as we mentioned the mathematics previously. And he, in the beginning chapter here of the world of universals, he mentions Plato's theory of ideas as one of the most successful attempts to bring together the idea of this, these universals, this unity with the particulars in the world. And one of the examples he gives is, triangularity, you might say. There's, or whiteness, you might say. The idea that there are things that have the quality of being white, or there are things that have the essence of a triangle. They are, three-angled objects that, whose angles add up to 180 degrees, and these are represented, you might say, by individual triangles in the material world. But the concept of triangularity, he would say, Plato would say, exists in some third realm, independent of us, this concept of triangularity. And the same thing, there's qualities of whiteness, but this idea of whiteness exists independent. Or he gives example, Russell does, of justice. There is this concept of justice, and then there are individual particular acts of justice that we can point to that have this quality or this essence of justice. And so what is justice? What is whiteness? What is triangularity? These are universals, and he's struggling with the idea of how they exist. They don't exist in the physical world. They don't exist necessarily in the mental world, because they're true when we're not thinking about them. As Christians, they obviously exist in the mind of God, because we're thinking God's thoughts after Him. He proceeds to talk about universals. Kind of interesting. He brings up that that there are, universals are basically represented by most of the words in the dictionary. Are universals, and there's no, not at one sentence. He says can even be formed. Proper or complete sentence can be formed without at least one universal. So the fact that universals are so universal should cause somebody to think about it. These are significant concepts in the problem of philosophy, the theory of philosophy. And so some philosophers, like empiricists, try to deny universals, and Russell points out that they're mostly focusing on qualities. Like, if you say the grass is green, the quality of grass, it could be denied. They're saying, well, there's not this universal of greenness. There's just the cause of our sense perception is not really a green, doesn't exist independent of our sense perception. They could make arguments like that to deny it. And so Russell, for example, says, since there are many white things, the resemblance must hold between many pairs of particular white things. And this is characteristic of a universal. And then he says it will be useless to say that there is a different resemblance for each pair, for then we'll have to say that the resemblances resemble each other, and we will at last be forced to admit a resemblance as a universal. So even if you try to get away from universals, he's saying that ultimately you have to recognize the fact that universals of relations exist. And if one patch of green resembles another patch of green more than it resembles a patch of red, well, the resemblance is greater than. Well, the concept of the universal of greater than exists. So ultimately, you're forced to admit that there are universals, and he brings up north of and to the left of as universal concepts that exist independent of us thinking about them. So Russell points out the concept or the universal idea north of, and he says that Edinburgh is north of London, and he says Edinburgh exists, London exists, but north of has some other type of existence. And he says it's not mental because it's still north of it, whether we're aware of it or not, or whether we think about it or not. But it exists independent of our minds, although minds apprehend it. And he says the conclusion, however, is met by the difficulty that the relation north of does not seem to exist in the same sense of Edinburgh and London. Where or when does this relation north of exist? And his answer is it doesn't exist anywhere or at any time. But it exists. It has existence. And so this is the issue with the universals of relations, at least, that has to be dealt with by somebody in their worldview. You're going to have to explain how you can justify a priori knowledge of universal truths, like the universal to the left of. I don't have to have any experience of any particular sensations, but if I think that something is to the left of something else, I know it's going to be on this side, regardless of whether I've experienced it or not. And no a number of experiences will make that more certain. It's deductively certain, and it a priori. And so these are universals that exist that apply, the to the north of, to the left of, that you have to account in your philosophy. And they're not they don't exist just simply within our sense data, because they are the cause of our sense data, and so they exist independent of us. So if they don't exist in our minds, they exist independent of our minds, unless you appeal to the mind of God, you're going to have this problem of trying to bring them into reconciliation. And our charge, as presuppositionalists, is that can't be done independent of a omnipotent, omniscient God who imposes purpose and will on his created universe. And so the reason that these relations and these qualities exist is because they are the creation of God. And the reason they maintain and continue to subsist when we're not thinking about them is because they're independent of our thought. They're dependent upon God's thought.